The November wind tore through the mountain lodge driveway like a blade wrapped in ice. 11:47 at night. The blizzard had teeth. Visibility collapsed to almost nothing, just white spinning violence and the sound of snow hitting asphalt like 10,000 needles striking at once. Mia Morales stumbled forward, her dark hair plastered to her pale face, a threadbare scarf soaked completely through. Her coat, which had once belonged to someone else, was torn at the shoulder, and beneath it, a bleeding wound wept slowly into the fabric. She was 29 years old but looked decades older, as if the years had weight and gravity and had been pressing down on her since childhood. She clutched her daughter's hand. Emma was 8. Her lips were blue. Her shoes were soaked through, falling apart at the seams, the kind of shoes that belonged in a trash bin, not on a living child's feet. 20 feet from the lodge entrance, Mia collapsed face-first into the snow. Emma screamed. The sound cut through the wind like something breaking. Inside the stone lodge, Luca Bianchi stood by the fireplace with his 2 most trusted men. Rocco was thick-shouldered, scarred across his jawline, his suit tailored to hide the weapons underneath. Sal was leaner, colder, the kind of man whose silence carried more weight than other men's words. All 3 of them were dressed in black suits that cost more than Mia would make in 6 months. Luca was 6'2", broad-chested, with dark hair silvered at the temples and a scar running from his left eye to his cheekbone like a blade stroke. His hands were large. His eyes were the color of a winter storm. Right now, those eyes were burning with a fury that made both men unconsciously step back. "My own brother," Luca said, his voice deep and solid like an oath. "Sal, confirm it again." "Confirmed," Sal replied, his tone flat. "Your brother Matteo sold your operations to the federal task force. The entire Los Angeles network. In exchange for immunity and a new identity." The words hung in the air like a curse that could not be erased. The fireplace crackled. Outside, the wind howled. Inside, something broke in Luca's chest. Then the door crashed open. Wind screamed into the lodge. Snow swirled across the hardwood floor. Both men's hands went immediately to the weapons they wore, but Rocco and Sal froze completely when they saw what had blown in. A woman was crawling on hands and knees in the doorway, dragging a small child behind her, leaving a trail of blood in the snow that was already beginning to freeze. The child was sobbing. The woman's face was hidden beneath the wet scarf, but her breathing was shallow, gasping, the sound of someone drowning in air. Luca Bianchi moved without thinking. He crossed the room in 4 strides. His hands, which had once held weapons, now held this stranger with the gentleness of a man soothing a lost child. He lifted her into his arms. She was barely conscious, her body trembling violently from cold and something else, something deeper than cold. "I just need to clean the rooms," she whispered, her voice trembling like a candle in the wind. "I am so sorry. I am late. I am so sorry." Her coat fell open as he carried her inside. Through her torn shirt, they were visible. Scars. Welts running in every direction like a map of hell. Some were old, faded to white lines. Others were newer, purple and angry. Some seemed to have been made by objects with edges. A belt. A buckle. Hands that had curled into fists. Rocco and Sal stood absolutely frozen. In 15 years of working for Luca Bianchi, they had never seen him touch anyone like this. They had never seen him move with such urgency for anyone who was not directly connected to his empire. They had never seen any softness in his face at all. But Luca did not notice their shock. He was already moving toward the master bedroom, already calling out orders. "Get blankets. Get the medical kit from the bathroom. Call Dr. Antonelli and tell him to come now. Not later. Now." The child followed him, Emma's small hand gripping his jacket, her sobs echoing through the stone corridors of the lodge. What happened next was something no one could explain. What Mia Morales did not know, as consciousness slipped away from her like water through open fingers, was that the man carrying her inside was the most dangerous criminal in Los Angeles. She did not know that the black SUVs parked in the underground garage belonged to a network that stretched from downtown to the ports. She did not know that the men in her presence had spent entire years making people disappear. She did not know that the scar on his face was a memory of a rival who had tried to kill him, and that rival had not been seen in 8 years. She did not know that this moment, this single moment when a powerful man chose mercy instead of indifference, would destroy everything she thought she understood about survival. Before we continue, drop a like if this story is hitting you. Share it with someone who needs to hear it and subscribe so you do not miss what is coming tomorrow. Now let us go back to the beginning, to the day Mia Morales first walked into Luca Bianchi's world without knowing who he was. The morning shift at the Bianchi Mountain Lodge began at 5 o'clock. Mia arrived at 4:35 because she was always early, because being early meant there was less chance of losing this job, and losing this job meant losing the roof that kept Emma alive. She had $34 in her pocket. 34. The numbers had been running through her head since 5 a.m. the previous morning. Rent was due in 6 days. 6 days. $34 divided by 6 days meant she had to earn at least $50 more, which meant working double shifts on top of her already impossible schedule, which meant leaving Emma with Mrs. Chen in apartment 3B, which meant paying Mrs. Chen $10, which brought her down to $24 for rent, which meant she was still short by $140. The math never worked. It had never worked, not in the 8 years since she had escaped, not in the 8 years since she had run from a man whose hands had learned to hurt her in 17 different ways. Mia's shoes left wet prints on the polished floor of the lodge hallway. She had worked here for 4 months. The Bianchi Mountain Lodge was a fortress of stone and glass perched on a cliff overlooking Los Angeles, the kind of place where powerful men came to conduct business away from cameras and federal eyes. She had never asked questions about who stayed here or what happened behind closed doors. Questions were a luxury she could not afford. She pushed her cleaning cart past the stone fireplace where, later that evening, a man with a scar would stand with the news that his own brother had betrayed him. But Mia did not know this yet. She simply pushed her cart toward the occupied guest rooms, her mind still locked on the calculation. She could ask her manager, David, for an advance on next week's pay. He had done it before, sometimes, when he was in a good mood. Last time he had done it, she had needed to stay late to clean his office while he worked at his desk, and she had become very still, very quiet, the way she always became still and quiet when a man was near and a door was closed. Nothing had happened that time. She had been lucky. Mia opened the supply closet and began filling her cart with clean towels, fresh sheets, bottles of soap that cost more than her daily food budget. As she worked, she became aware of voices downstairs. Male voices. Deep voices that carried the weight of authority. One of them was giving orders. The other two were responding with yes, sir, and understood, sir. She worked faster. Stay invisible. Stay quiet. Do the job well enough that they forget you exist, and you get to keep the money, and Emma gets to stay in school, and maybe, eventually, the math will work out differently. The voice downstairs grew louder. It was not angry. It was worse than angry. It was controlled. It was the voice of someone who had learned to express violence through tone rather than volume. Find him before nightfall. I do not care what it takes. My brother chose his side. Now he will live with his choice. Footsteps. Multiple sets. Heavy boots on hardwood. Mia stood in the supply closet with clean towels pressed against her chest and tried to remember how to breathe normally. This was not her world. She cleaned rooms. She counted money that was never enough. She made sure Emma's homework was done and her daughter's nightmares about the bad man did not wake the neighbors. She did not know powerful men who gave orders that sounded like sentences. She pushed the cart down the hallway, keeping her eyes down, her movement small and careful. In room 314, she began stripping sheets from the bed, her hands moving through the motions with the precision of someone who had done this exact task 2,000 times before. The wind outside the window had already begun to pick up. Storm coming. By evening, the forecast said, it would be a blizzard. Mia finished room 314 and moved to 315, then 316. By 8 o'clock, she had completed 14 rooms. By 10 o'clock, she had completed 23. Her back ached. Her hands were raw from bleach and hot water. She had not eaten since yesterday's crackers, which Emma had actually eaten most of while Mia pretended to have eaten first. At 11:15, the phone call came through. Mia? It was David, the night manager. Where are you? You need to come in. We have an emergency. One of the suites needs a complete turnover in the next 2 hours. I am at home, she said quietly. Emma was already asleep on their shared mattress, curled into a ball, her breathing steady and innocent. I know. I am calling to tell you to come in. Now. We will pay you overtime. The word overtime made the calculation shift. Overtime meant time and a half. That meant this one emergency could cover half of the rent gap. That meant maybe the math could work this month. Okay, she said. I will be there in 40 minutes. She left Emma sleeping and caught the 11:25 bus. It was already snowing. By the time she arrived at the lodge, the snow had become something else, something violent and furious, wind moving so fast it seemed to have a heartbeat. She climbed out of the bus and began walking up the long driveway toward the lodge entrance, the snow already soaking through her shoes. She did not know that at that exact moment, inside the lodge, a man with a scar was learning that his own family had chosen betrayal. She did not know that his world was about to collapse. She did not know that her life was about to change in ways she could never have imagined. She simply walked toward the light, toward the job, toward the overtime money that might keep her daughter alive for another month. The wind cut through her coat. Her shoes fell apart. Emma was far away, sleeping safely, and Mia was walking toward something she could not see, toward a man she did not know, toward a moment that would transform everything. The lodge doors grew closer. The alarm on Mia's phone did not go off. It never went off because her phone had died at 4:12 in the morning, and she did not notice until she opened her eyes in the darkness of the one-room apartment and saw no light blinking from the nightstand. The clock on the wall, the one with one hand missing, showed 4:36. She had wanted to wake at 4:30. She had wanted 17 minutes of buffer time before Emma needed to be dressed, before the school bus arrived at 5:15, before the day began its relentless arithmetic of shortage and survival. Mia moved quietly across the creaking floor, her bare feet numb from the cold. The apartment was called efficient, which meant it was smaller than most people's garages. One room served as bedroom, kitchen, and living space. The wallpaper peeled in long strips like skin after a sunburn, faded into a color that had probably been yellow before the world made it gray. There was no heater. There was a space heater she used only at night, and only for 2 hours, because every hour it ran cost money she did not have. Emma slept on the mattress they shared, curled into a ball so small she barely made an impression on the fabric. She was 8 years old and looked like her mother in the photographs from before. Before the man who promised to love her. Before the scars. Before everything split into the world that existed before and the world that existed now. Emma's breathing was even and innocent, her thumb finding her mouth even in sleep, a habit she had not yet outgrown. Mia opened the mini-fridge that hummed with the sound of a dying engine. Inside, half a gallon of milk, 3 eggs, 1 box of cereal so old the flakes had turned soft. She had $34 in her pocket. $34 had to become 7 days of food. She did the math without thinking anymore. The math was automatic now, as natural as breathing. Milk lasted for days if she was careful. Eggs were $5 a dozen, but she could buy 3 for $1 from the corner store where the owner did not ask questions. Bread was 99 cents. Cereal was emergency food. She reached for it. She made breakfast in a bowl so chipped the edges had become dangerous. She poured exactly half a cup of milk. She added cereal until it absorbed the milk but was not swimming in liquid. She set it on the small table where the wood was warped and soft, and she woke Emma by touching her shoulder, gently, the way she had learned to do because sudden movements made Emma flinch. Emma opened her eyes and found her mother's face and said nothing. This was their morning ritual. No good morning. No sleepy words. Just the acknowledgement of light and presence and another day that had arrived without permission. Breakfast, Mia said. Emma sat up and ate the cereal slowly, as if tasting each flake individually. She was thin in a way that made Mia's chest feel like something was breaking inside it. Emma was 8 years old and was already learning the mathematics of shortage. Mia dressed her in the school uniform that cost money she did not have but was required anyway. Navy blue dress with a white collar. White socks that matched, which Emma had learned to appreciate as a luxury. Shoes that had been purchased from a thrift store for $4. Emma's own first shoes, the ones from the shelter, the ones Mia had stolen 8 years ago when she was desperate and broken and needed something, anything, to be hers alone, were hidden in the apartment. Pink shoes. Size 3. White laces. Mia kept them in a showbox under the mattress the way other women kept jewelry. They walked to the bus stop in the rain. The rain was cold and came sideways because the wind pushed it that way. Mia carried 2 plastic bags from the grocery store because she could not afford actual bags and the plastic was already tearing. One corner of the left bag had split completely, and the bottom of a box of rice was getting wet. Rice was survival food. Rice was $8 for a 10-pound bag that lasted 3 weeks. She could not let it get damaged. Emma held Mia's hand. Her small fingers gripped tight enough that Mia could feel her daughter's pulse. Or maybe that was her own pulse. Maybe they were the same heartbeat by now. "Mommy, can I ask you something?" Emma said. "Yes." "Does the rain taste like the sky?" Mia looked at her daughter's face, her cheeks wet from the rain, her eyes serious and strange with the kind of questions only children asked. She thought about how to answer. She thought about whether anything she said mattered anymore or if the answer was just rain tasting like rain, cold and empty. "I think rain tastes like sadness," Mia said. "But it also tastes like something else." "What?" Emma asked. "Tomorrow," Mia said. "It tastes like tomorrow. Like something coming." The bus pulled up. The driver did not look at them. Mia walked Emma to her seat and kissed the top of her head where her hair was still damp. She watched the bus pull away into the grey morning. She had $14 left after Emma's school fees had been paid. $14 for 3 days. The Grand Alpine Lodge sat 2 hours outside Los Angeles, up in the mountains where the air was clean and the prices were doubled because wealthy people paid them. The lodge was all glass and stone, all clean lines and expensive minimalism. It had been built 42 years ago by a family that no longer owned it. Now it was managed by Douglas Hale. Douglas Hale was 53 years old but moved like something younger and more dangerous. He had slick back hair the color of a wet rat and a smile that revealed too many teeth. He wore suits that probably cost more than Mia's monthly rent, and when he walked through the hallways of the lodge, everyone moved out of his way because they understood without being told that he was the kind of man who did not accept obstacles. Mia worked 6 days a week at the lodge. She arrived at 6:15 in the morning and worked until her assigned rooms were finished, which sometimes meant 2:27 in the afternoon and sometimes meant 8:44 at night, depending on what Douglas decided that day. She earned $9.25 per hour, which was below minimum wage, but Douglas assured her that this was an opportunity, that many people would be grateful to work here, that complaining would result in immediate termination. On a Tuesday morning in November, Mia was restocking the supply closet on the 3rd floor when Douglas found her. She heard his footsteps first, deliberate, measured, the sound of someone who knew exactly where he was going. She heard the click of the heavy door closing behind him. She did not turn around. "Mia," he said, and his voice was like something made of teeth and honey. "Working hard?" "Yes, sir," she said. He stood closer. She could smell his cologne and something else underneath it, something like stale sweat and darker things. She did not turn around. In the 8 years since the man who promised to love her, Mia had learned not to turn around. She had learned not to speak unless spoken to. She had learned not to breathe too loudly. You want to keep this job, he said. You do what I say when I say it. You understand? Yes, she said, and the word came out small and broken like a door closing. He was standing so close that she could feel the heat coming off his body. He reached out and touched her shoulder, his hand heavy and deliberate. Good, he said. Because there are always other girls who would love your position. He left as suddenly as he had arrived. The door closed. The moment ended and became part of the architecture of her days, another thing that happened that she would not tell anyone because there was no one to tell, because speaking about it would make it more real, and she needed it to stay small and manageable and something she could survive in silence. Mia worked the rest of her shift. She cleaned 12 rooms. She scrubbed soap scum from shower walls. She changed sheets that smelled like perfume and sin. She emptied trash cans full of the detritus of wealthy people's brief vacations. She was paid $110.60 for the day. She deposited it into the account that had $86 in it. After her shift, she walked to the playground near the apartment building where Emma sometimes waited after her after-school program. The rain had stopped, but the ground was wet and everything smelled like decay and earth turning cold. Emma was on the monkey bars, hanging upside down by her knees, her uniform skirt falling around her head. A boy was climbing near her, maybe 9 years old, moving like he was climbing something inside himself. He reached for a bar Emma was already holding and their hands touched and something shifted in his body. He moved too fast. He lost his grip. He fell. The sound was the thing Mia would remember. Not a scream. Not a child crying out. The sound of a small body hitting rubber matting, the thud that landed in her chest like a second heartbeat gone wrong. The boy was lying on the ground. He was not crying. He was not moving. Emma had jumped down and was standing next to him, her small face utterly still. Mia ran. She was there in seconds that felt like hours. She knelt beside the boy and looked at him with the efficiency of someone who had learned how to stay calm because the alternative was falling apart entirely. "What is your name?" she asked. "Marco," the boy said, and his voice was small and terrified. "Can you move your legs?" He moved them. Both of them. She checked his arms. She checked his head for bleeding. There was a scrape on his knee that was bleeding, but he was breathing and conscious and his pupils were the same size. "You are going to be fine," she said. "Can you sit up slowly?" He sat up. Emma stepped over and stood very close to him, the way she stood very close to her mother when the night was dark and something bad was happening inside the apartment walls. A black SUV pulled up to the curb of the playground. It was the kind of vehicle that did not belong in this neighborhood, all tinted windows and expensive detailing and the kind of understated power that made people instinctively step back. The door opened. The man who emerged was tall, probably 6'2", and his body carried the kind of control that came from knowing exactly how much damage it could do. He wore a coat that probably cost more than everything Mia owned, dark gray wool with a silk lining visible when he moved. His hair was dark with threads of silver at the temples. A scar ran from the corner of his left eye down to his cheekbone, a thin line like something had once tried to cut through his face and had only partially succeeded. His eyes found the boy first. She could see him doing calculations in his head, checking for damage, assessing threat. "Marco," he said, and his voice was deep and solid like an oath. "What happened?" "I fell," Marco said. "It is my fault. I pushed. I was not paying attention and she..." He looked at Mia. "She helped me. I was scared and she helped me." The man's eyes moved to Mia. He looked at her the way people usually did not look at people like her, not through her, not past her, but directly at her, as if she was something worth seeing. He looked at her wet shoes with the hole in the left sole. He looked at her coat that was not actually a coat but a jacket someone had given her 3 years ago. He looked at her hands, which were red and cracked from cleaning and cold and the general violence of poverty. "Thank you," he said, and the words came out carefully, as if he did not use them often. "For helping him." "He is fine," Mia said. "Just a scrape." The man knelt beside the boy. He was gentle with him in a way that was surprising on a face that looked like it had seen things that would break ordinary people. He checked the knee himself. He looked at Marco's pupils. He looked at him the way Mia looked at Emma, with a kind of careful inventory of damage and relief. "Come on," he said to Marco. "Let us get you home. Your mother will want to see you." He stood. He looked at Mia one more time, and something in his expression shifted, as if he was seeing something beyond what was visible. As if he was seeing straight through to the part of her that had learned to survive by becoming invisible. "You should let me help with those shoes," he said, gesturing to her feet. "I am fine," Mia said, and she meant it in a way that had nothing to do with shoes. He nodded, as if he understood that fine was a word that contained entire worlds of endurance and desperation. He took Marco's hand and walked him to the SUV. The boy looked back once at Emma, and Emma watched them go with the seriousness of someone who was already learning that people who were kind sometimes had to leave. Mia walked home through the November rain. $14 remained in her pocket. 3 days of food. 30 hours of work at the lodge before the next deposit. Douglas Hale's touch still on her shoulder like a stain that would not wash away. The apartment was cold and empty when she arrived. The space heater sat in the corner like a broken promise. The showbox under the mattress held Emma's first shoes, pink and small and stolen. Mia pulled them out and held them in the darkness, feeling the weight of them, remembering the night 8 years ago when she had taken them because she needed to own something, anything, that was not borrowed or broken or given to her by people who wanted something in return. The shoes were still perfect. Size 3. White laces. Pink leather. They had never been worn. At exactly 11:44 p.m. on a November night when the temperature had dropped to 18 degrees and the mountain pass was a white wall of nothing, the heavy oak door of the Grand Alpine Lodge burst inward with a crack like a gunshot in the silence. Mia Morales stumbled across the threshold, her body moving on instinct alone, on the animal knowledge that staying in the blizzard meant death. Her shoes were soaked through. Her thin jacket offered no protection. She had walked for miles from the staff quarters through conditions that should have been impossible, and her legs were barely responding anymore. Behind her, the wind howled like a living thing hungry for her collapse. She did not see the man at the fireplace. Luca Bianchi stood with his back to the entrance, his silhouette framed by flames that cast orange light across expensive Italian leather and the kind of tailored suit that cost more than 3 months of her wages. His dark hair was silvered at the temples, his shoulders broad and controlled, every line of him suggesting a life spent making decisions that bent others to his will. His jaw was tight. His hands pressed flat against the stone mantelpiece with such force that the veins in his forearms stood out like cords. He had been standing in this exact position for the past hour, thinking about betrayal, about blood that turned to poison, about the brother who had sold him for $2.3 million. He did not turn at the sound of the door. Rocco turned. Rocco, who had worked for Luca Bianchi for 15 years and had learned to read the silence between his orders like a language, moved toward the entrance with the practiced efficiency of a man trained in violence. His suit was black. His eyes were dark and assessing. When he saw Mia, when he saw the blood seeping through her coat in a slow, spreading stain, his body went rigid. "Boss," Rocco said, and there was something in his voice that cut through the static of Luca's thoughts. Luca turned. What he saw was a woman on the edge of collapse, her hair matted to her face, her lips white with cold, her eyes unfocused with the particular terror of someone who had been running. There was blood on her sleeve. There were scratches on her cheek. There was the unmistakable posture of someone who had learned to make themselves smaller, quieter, less visible. He did not ask who she was. He did not ask how she had arrived at his private lodge in the middle of a blizzard. He moved toward her like a man moving toward someone drowning, and when she swayed, his arm came around her waist to hold her upright. "I have to work," Mia whispered, her voice barely a thread. "Douglas will fire me. I cannot lose this job." Luca's expression went cold. He lifted her, and she was light, so terribly light, as if her body had been slowly disappearing for years, and carried her toward the guest wing. Rocco followed, his mind racing through possibilities, none of them good. Sal appeared from the back hallway with blankets, his weathered face creasing with confusion. "Get the doctor," Luca said. "Now." In the guest room, surrounded by expensive wallpaper and furniture that cost more than Mia had made in her entire life, he laid her on the bed with the careful precision of someone who understood that broken things required gentleness. Her coat came off, revealing the extent of the damage beneath, the way her thin dress clung to her body, the way her skin had taken on a bluish pallor that spoke of hypothermia setting in. "Mama!" A small voice came from the doorway. Emma stood there, no more than 8 years old, her face swollen from crying, her winter coat still buttoned, her shoes still on her feet. She had followed her mother into the blizzard. She had walked those for miles too. Luca turned to face her, and for the first time in 15 years, Rocco heard a different voice come from his boss's mouth. A voice like someone soothing a lost child. "What is your name?" Luca asked, kneeling beside the small girl. "Emma," she whispered. "I could not let her walk alone." She was scared. "That is a good age, 8 years old," Luca said. "You are very brave. Your mother is going to be fine. Can you come with me? I have something warm for you to drink." He extended his hand, and Emma took it without hesitation, the way children sometimes recognize safety before their minds catch up. Rocco watched his boss lead the small girl down the hallway, watched him settle her in the kitchen, watched him prepare hot chocolate as if this was something he had done 1,000 times instead of never. By the time the doctor arrived, Mia had stabilized somewhat, though barely. Dr. Chen examined her with efficient precision, his expression growing darker with each discovery. "Hypothermia," he said. "Blood loss from wounds that have reopened. Severe exhaustion. Malnutrition." He pulled back her sleeve to reveal her arm, and then he turned to look at her back, at the network of scars running in every direction like a map of devastation. Luca's entire body went still. "These are 8 years old," the doctor said quietly. "Someone hurt her. Badly. Will she recover?" Luca asked, and his voice was the blade-wrapped in ice version, the version that made men rethink their choices. "If she rests. If she eats. If she stops whatever she was doing to herself out there in that cold." Rocco muttered something under his breath, a prayer or a curse, he could not tell which. In 15 years, he had never seen Luca Bianchi stand over a stranger with that expression on his face. An expression like recognition. Like rage. Like something cold and dangerous stirring in a chest that had learned not to feel. Mia woke at 3:20 a.m., panicked, trying to leave. "I have to clean the rooms," she said, her voice hoarse. "Douglas will fire me. I cannot lose this job." Luca stopped her gently, his hand on her shoulder firm but not harsh. "You are not going anywhere," he said. "You are safe here. You are going to rest." "Who are you?" Mia stared at him, uncomprehending. "Luca," he said, using only his first name. "Just Luca." She did not recognize it. The blizzard continued for 2 days, trapping them all in the lodge while the world outside became a white void. On the first morning, over breakfast that Mia picked at without appetite, she mentioned Douglas Hale. "I work for him," she said quietly. "At the lodge. He is the manager." Luca's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. Emma played with building blocks near the fireplace, humming a tune no one recognized. His eyes tracked them, the mother and daughter, with an intensity that made Sal exchange a glance with Rocco. The kind of look that meant they were witnessing something unprecedented. "I have exactly $34, Mia continued, her voice small. "I need to go back to work by Monday or I lose my next paycheck. I cannot afford to lose even one day." Luca set down his coffee. "You will not be going back to work," he said. "I have to. Emma needs." "You will not be going back," he repeated, and there was no anger in it, only certainty. That afternoon, when she asked him why he was helping her, why a stranger would risk so much for someone he did not know, Mia's voice carried the resignation of someone who had learned that kindness always came with a price. "I am nobody," she said. "You must want something." Luca stepped closer. The afternoon light through the windows turned his eyes the color of storm clouds. "You helped someone I care about," he said. "Months ago, in a park. A boy with a scraped knee. You cleaned his wound. You did not know who his family was. You did not know what I was. You did it because he was hurt and you were the kind of person who stops to help." Mia's breath caught. "The boy at the playground. The one with the golden watch." "My nephew," Luca said. "You treated him like he was worth something. Like he mattered." He paused. "You are not nobody. The people who did this to you believed you were nobody, and that belief needs to be corrected." That evening, after Emma fell asleep on the couch, wrapped in a cashmere blanket that cost more than Mia had made in a year, she finally broke. Her voice was steady as she spoke, which was somehow worse than if she had cried. She described the man she had met 8 years ago. She described the promises. She described the night when his hand became a fist. She described the scars running across her back like a map of every moment he had decided to hurt her instead of letting her go. She reached into her bag with shaking hands and withdrew a showbox. Inside were 2 tiny pink shoes with white laces. Size 3. Never worn. From the shelter, she whispered. "The night I decided I had to get away from him. I took them because I needed something that was mine alone. Something he did not give me. Something he could not take away." Luca reached out and held the shoes like they were made of spun glass. "You survived," he said. "That makes you stronger than most people I know. And it makes you worth helping." The next morning arrived with a sound like an engine, like authority, like the world imposing itself on the mountain. Douglas Hale's black SUV pulled up to the lodge at 8:38 a.m., and with him came Victoria Ashford, her blonde hair perfectly arranged, her winter coat tailored in Paris, her smile sharp as broken glass. Douglas stormed through the entrance without removing his coat. When he saw Mia emerging from the kitchen, when he registered her standing in his employer's private lodge in dry clothes with her hair brushed, his face transformed. Red. Violent. Proprietary. "What the hell are you doing here?" he demanded. "You are supposed to be working. Get to the staff quarters now." Victoria's laugh cut through the tension like a blade. "Oh, how delightful," she purred. "The help is playing guest. How did you get him to let you inside, darling? Is that the strategy now?" Luca stepped between them, and the room seemed to shrink. Douglas recovered his bravado, turning to address the man he thought he could intimidate. "We need to talk. Privately. About our arrangement." He glanced at Mia with naked contempt. "About the $125,000 you are going to pay us. 2 weeks. Or we go to the FBI with everything." Victoria nodded, her perfectly manicured hands folded together. "We have evidence of your operations," she said. "Your partners. Your money. Your empire. Pay us or you lose it all." Rocco's hand moved toward the inside of his jacket, but Luca raised one finger and every man in the room froze. "You will have an answer by Friday," Luca said, his voice level and controlled. Douglas turned to leave, but Victoria lingered long enough to whisper, just loud enough for Mia to hear, "I cannot believe he lets the maid sleep in the guest rooms. How absolutely pathetic." After the door closed, Mia's hands began to shake. Luca met her eyes. "I own part of this lodge," he said. "Douglas has been stealing from me. Blackmailing me. He is going to destroy everything I have built. And Victoria, she hired you years ago to humiliate you. She is working with Douglas. They are both going to pay for what they have done." But what Mia did not know, what no one in the room knew, was that Luca had already made a single phone call 3 hours earlier, to a contact buried deep in the Federal Bureau of Investigation. The walls were closing in on Douglas Hale and Victoria Ashford faster than either of them could imagine. For days had passed since Douglas Hale and Victoria Ashford walked into the manager's office with their demands, since Luca's voice had cut through the room like a blade wrapped in ice. For days of waiting. For days of Mia moving through the lodge in a kind of suspended animation, cleaning rooms that felt smaller than before, folding towels with hands that would not stop trembling. The phone call came at 6:38 in the morning. Douglas's voice through the receiver was pure venom, each were designed to wound. "You need to get to the lodge. Now. Your shift starts in 30 minutes and if you are not here, you are fired. Understood?" He did not wait for an answer. The line went dead. Mia stood in the small apartment she rented above a laundromat on Figueroa Street, holding the phone against her ear long after the dial tone had changed to a flat, mechanical hum. Emma was still asleep on the cot in the corner, her small body curled beneath a blanket that had been washed so many times it felt like tissue paper. Outside the window, the snow was melting into grey slush. The morning was already 42 degrees Fahrenheit and climbing. She took the bus through streets that gleamed with dirty water. The number 7 crosstown, packed with people whose eyes did not meet hers, who existed in the same invisible space she had always occupied. 53 minutes of staring at her reflection in the scratched plastic window, watching her own face disappear and reappear with each stop. She arrived at the Grand Alpine Lodge at 9:15 a.m., her coat still damp from the melting snow, her shoes leaving wet prints on the marble floor of the lobby. The manager's office was on the 2nd floor. Douglas was already there, pacing back and forth in front of the window. Victoria sat at the desk with a nail file in her hand, moving it across her index finger with the casual precision of someone who had nothing but time. She did not look up when Mia entered. "You are late," Douglas said. His face was flushed, the color of old brick. He was a man in his 50s with the kind of soft bulk that came from years of office work and room service dinners, from a life spent taking small cruelties out on people who could not fight back. Today, something else was burning behind his eyes. Something worse than anger. Fear. "My shift does not start for 12 minutes, Mia said. Her voice came out steady, which surprised her. "Do not talk back to me." Douglas stepped closer. Too close. His breath smelled like black coffee and something sour. "You think you can play house with rich men? You think that changes who you are? You are nothing. You will always be nothing. You understand me?" Mia felt the space between them collapse like an accordion. She had been in this space before. In the apartment of a man who promised to love her. In the humiliating moments at Victoria's charity events, where she had been paraded around like a broken toy. In 1,000 small rooms where she had learned the specific shape of her own worthlessness. Victoria finally looked up from her nails. She really thought someone like him would care about her, she said to Douglas, as if Mia were not standing there, as if she were furniture, as if she were air. How sad. How absolutely pathetic. Something shifted inside Mia's chest. Not breaking. Not shattering. But moving. Tilting. Like the moment before an avalanche starts to fall. Douglas's hand shot out and grabbed her arm. His fingers dug into the soft skin above her elbow hard enough that she could feel the individual pressure points of each one, hard enough that she knew there would be a bruise in the shape of his grip by nightfall. "You have one job," he said. His voice had dropped to something between a whisper and a growl. "Clean the rooms. Keep your mouth shut. Do not speak to the boss. Do not tell anyone anything about what happened in this lodge. You understand me?" Mia pulled her arm away. The movement was small. One sharp motion backward, muscles suddenly remembering that they had the right to refuse. Douglas's grip broke. Her arm came free. "No," she said. The word hung in the air like a gunshot. "No?" Douglas's face went purple. The vein in his neck began to pulse. "Did you just say no to me?" "I said no," Mia repeated. Her hands were shaking but her voice was not. She thought of Emma sleeping on a cot, of the pair of pink leather shoes in her pocket that she had stolen from a shelter 8 years ago because she needed to own something, anything. She thought of the night Luca had found her in the snow. She thought of the way he had looked at her scars and had not turned away. "You do not get to hurt me anymore." Douglas raised his hand to strike her, and Luca's voice cut through the room like a blade wrapped in ice. "Touch her and you are dead." Luca stood in the doorway with his hands at his sides, his face perfectly composed, his eyes the color of storm clouds. Rocco and Sal stood behind him, silent and lethal as shadows. The air in the room changed. It became the kind of air you could taste on your tongue, metal and ash. Douglas spun around, his raised hand dropping uselessly to his side. Victoria rose from the chair, suddenly uncertain. Her mouth opened and closed like a creature pulled from water. "We had a deal," she managed. "The $125,000. You agreed." Luca ignored her. He spoke directly to Douglas, his voice solid and low like an oath carved into stone. "You have been stealing from my operation for 8 months. Skimming the register. Pocketing cash from guests. You have been blackmailing me with evidence you collected illegally from confidential files. You have been abusing your staff. Forcing overtime. Taking their tips. Harassing them." His voice dropped even lower. "And 2 minutes ago, you just threatened the woman who told me everything." Douglas went pale. The color drained from his face so completely that he looked like a man carved from wax. "She what?" "Mia told me about the stolen tips," Luca said. "The forced overtime. The harassment. Every single violation. Every single name of every single person you have hurt. She told me everything." Victoria tried again. "This is ridiculous. We have evidence. We have recordings. We can destroy you. We can end you." Luca smiled without warmth. It was not a warm smile. It was the kind of smile a predator shows just before it stops pretending to be anything other than what it is. "So can I?" he said. The sound that followed was the door opening. 3 men in dark suits entering. Federal agents. Their badges catching the light from the window. Douglas's mouth opened to scream and no sound came out. Victoria's hands went to her throat. The room filled with voices, with movement, with the sudden and absolute knowledge that the walls they had built to protect themselves were made of paper. Rocco stepped toward Mia and offered her his arm. "Come with me," he said gently. And she did. Behind her, she heard Douglas begin to cry. She did not hear what he said. She did not want to know. She walked down the hallway with Rocco and Sal, down the stairs, back out into the parking lot where the sun was breaking through the clouds in long, pale beams of light. The snow was melting. The world was thawing. Luca found her standing at the edge of the parking lot at dawn the next morning, hands shaking, breath fogging in the freezing air. Her thin coat did nothing to stop the cold from cutting through her skin. She was touching something in her pocket, her fingers moving against it like a prayer. The pair of pink leather shoes Emma's feet had grown out of 5 years ago. The first shoes that had ever been entirely hers alone. "I was afraid," Mia said, not turning around. "That he would call before the agents came. That he would say something that would make me believe him. That he would convince me I was imagining everything. But he did not," Luca said. "But he did not," Mia repeated. Her voice was barely a whisper. Luca stood beside her in the pre-dawn darkness. "Do you remember what I told you the night I found you in the snow? That I was not alone anymore." "Yes," Luca said. His hand found hers in her pocket, careful not to startle her, gentle as a man soothing a lost child. "And I meant it." At exactly 6:38 a.m. that same morning, 12 FBI agents in tactical gear moved through the Grand Alpine Lodge like ghosts made flesh. Their boots struck the hardwood floors in synchronized rhythm. Radios crackled with codes and coordinates. Doors were breached. Evidence was photographed and catalogued. Douglas Hale was pulled from his apartment in handcuffs, screaming about rights and mistakes while agents moved around him with the efficiency of people who had heard 1,000 denials and believed none of them. He collapsed to his knees, trembling like a cornered animal, his face streaked with sweat and tears. "Please," he whispered. "I will give everything back. I will cooperate. Please." Victoria was arrested at her Los Angeles penthouse in front of news cameras. She stood in the doorway of her home as agents read charges into a microphone: extortion, conspiracy, money laundering, human trafficking violations related to her treatment of staff. Her face froze in shock as photographers captured every frame. Her name appeared in federal documents on every news channel. CNN, MSNBC, Fox. Her face. Her crimes. Her complete and total destruction. Both were denied bail. The courtroom was silent except for the sound of the judge's gavel hitting wood. Douglas Hale stood at the defendant's table, his hands pressed against the surface to keep them from shaking. The prosecutor stood and began to read: theft, extortion, harassment of employees, assault. These crimes span a period of 8 months and have caused immeasurable harm to 12 individuals who came to work with the expectation of safety. Douglas wept. His shoulders heaved. His mouth opened and closed soundlessly like a fish pulled from water. The maximum sentence for extortion alone is 5 years, the judge said. Her voice was made of iron. For blackmail, 10 years. For assault, another 5. For the conspiracy charges related to money laundering, another 20 years. This court finds you guilty on all counts. She paused. The silence stretched like an elastic pulled taut. 40 years, she said. Federal prison. No parole. You will serve every day of it. Douglas crumpled. Not slowly. All at once, like a marionette whose strings had been cut. Victoria's trial lasted 3 weeks. She sat at the defendant's table in a cream-colored suit, her jaw clenched so tightly that the muscles in her neck stood out like cables. She refused to cry. She refused to break. But her hands betrayed her. They trembled against the polished wood of the table. They shook as the prosecutor called witness after witness. 12 women who testified about the humiliation, the exploitation, the deliberate cruelty that had been served to them with smiles and charity event photographs. A former chambermaid named Rosa spoke first. She would call me into her suite and make me stand while she circled me, Rosa said, her voice barely steady. She would tell me I was stupid. That I would never be anything but a maid. That my accent was embarrassing. She would have her friends laugh at me. It was deliberate. It was intentional. Victoria's face went white. Not from guilt. From exposure. From the sudden and absolute knowledge that her secrets were being read aloud in a room full of strangers. The judge sentenced her to 38 years. You have caused systematic harm to vulnerable individuals, the judge said. Your crimes were motivated by entitlement and malice. This court finds you guilty on all counts. Victoria was led away in handcuffs. Photographers captured every step. Her face. Her fall. The complete disintegration of everything she had built. Luca watched both arrests from a distance. Rocco stood beside him on the courthouse steps, his face unreadable. It is done, Rocco said quietly. Luca nodded once. The morning sun caught the silver in his hair, turning it to something like metal. Justice delivered, Luca said. 2 months later, the mountain lodge stood quiet under an October sky, the early snow melting into dark patches on the driveway where Luca had carried Mia through the blizzard. She stood in the kitchen now, holding a coat that actually fit her shoulders, a coat purchased with money that was actually hers. Emma sat at the pine table, her feet swinging just above the floor, her new shoes planted firmly on the wood. Pink. White laces. Just like the pair Mia had carried for 8 years, the shoes she had stolen from a shelter when Emma was born, when she needed something, anything, that belonged to her daughter and not to the man who had broken her. Luca appeared in the doorway, and Mia's breath caught. He wore a charcoal suit, tailored perfectly, the kind of garment that cost more than 3 months of her old wages. His dark eyes found hers first, then Emma, then settled on the shoes on the table. Your job starts Monday, he said. The words came out like silk over gravel. Lodge manager. $67,000 per year. Health insurance. Housing included. The cottage near the gardens. Mia's throat tightened. She could not speak. Emma looked up from her coloring book. "Will you teach me to build a fire?" she asked Luca, direct as only a child could be. "Yes," he said without hesitation. "Tonight, if your mother permits." Mia found her voice, though it came out smaller than she intended. "Why?" The word hung in the air. "Why me? Why would you do this? I am nobody. I clean rooms. I—" "Stop," Luca said. He moved into the kitchen with that measured grace, each step deliberate. He pulled out the chair across from her and sat down. His expensive suit creased at the knees. "You are not nobody. The people who did this to you are Douglas, Victoria, the man who broke your back. They believed you were nobody. And that belief needs to be corrected. You saved me on the worst night of my life, Mia. You told me your story when you could have stayed silent. You showed me mercy when mercy was the last thing I deserved. I saved you because it was the only choice that made sense." He paused. Emma continued coloring, unbothered, the crayon scraping against the paper. "We are bound by shared darkness," Luca continued. His voice sounded different when he spoke to her, softer, like a man learning a new language. "That binds people in ways that nothing else can. You deserve more than survival. You deserve to live." The word settled into her chest like stones into still water, disturbing everything. Outside, Rocco leaned against the black SUV parked near the gates, watching through the kitchen window as Luca helped Emma down from her chair, as his hand briefly, barely, touched Mia's shoulder as he passed. Sal approached, 2 cups of coffee steaming in the cold air. "He is different now," Sal said quietly. There was no judgment in his voice, only observation. Rocco accepted the coffee. "Not worse." "No," Sal agreed. "Just different." That evening, as the sun collapsed behind the ridge of mountains, Luca built a fire in the outdoor pit while Emma sat on his shoulders, her small hands braced against his forehead. Mia watched from the bench, a blanket wrapped around her, feeling something dangerous unfold inside her chest, something that felt almost like happiness. Luca showed Emma how to arrange the kindling, how to respect the fire, how to understand that destruction and warmth came from the same source. The flames rose, catching the darkness, and for a moment Luca looked up and found Mia watching him. He did not look away. Later, after Emma slept, they sat by the fireplace in the lodge's great room. The clock on the mantel read 11:41. Outside, the November wind pressed against the windows, but inside it was warm, the fire sending shadows dancing across Luca's face. "My brother," Luca said, his voice barely above the crackling wood. "I decided not to kill him." Mia's hands went still in her lap. "I could have," he continued. "The organization would have expected it. But you showed me something that night when you told me about the man who hurt you. You said you never told anyone because you were too ashamed. Too afraid. Too broken. But you didn't let that break you into a weapon. You broke, yes, but you broke the way broken things do, carefully, with edges that might cut, but not to destroy others. You taught me that survival does not require becoming the thing that hurt you." He reached over and took her hand. His palm was warm, his grip gentle. "I exiled him," Luca said. "Forever. Out of the country. Out of my world. It is a mercy he does not deserve, but it is a mercy nonetheless." Mia squeezed his hand. She did not have words. Words felt too small. The next morning, Mia found the shoes. The original pair, the one she had carried through 8 years of running, the one she had kept because they meant Emma belonged to someone, to herself, if nothing else. They were placed in her bag, cleaned, preserved, placed gently as if they were made of glass. She took them to the mantel and set them there, between a candle and a photograph of mountains. She did not need to carry them anymore. Luca found her standing before the mantel, her hand raised but not quite touching the shoes. He understood without speaking. That was becoming their language, silences that meant more than words ever could. He moved beside her, their hands close enough to feel the warmth between them, not quite touching. They stood like that as the afternoon light moved across the room, watching the shoes catch the gold of the sun, the first pair of shoes that had ever belonged entirely to Emma, entirely to Joy, entirely to a future that Mia could now see stretching forward like a road finally illuminated. 6 months later, the mountain lodge gleamed under spring sunshine. Mia stood at the front desk, her hair pulled back, her posture straight, her voice steady as she directed a family to their room. No one could see the scars on her back anymore because she had learned something far more powerful than hiding them. She had learned not to be ashamed. Emma attended a private school 3 miles down the mountain. She had friends. She had a bedroom with shelves full of books. She had learned to laugh in a way that sounded like bells. Luca had restructured his operations with methodical precision, cutting out every operation that existed in shadows, legitimizing everything that could be legitimized, building a foundation in Mia's name that helped women escaping situations exactly like hers. His lieutenants had watched this transformation with the kind of bewilderment usually reserved for witnessing miracles, but they had adapted. Power is power, regardless of the form it takes. Douglas Hale served his sentence in a federal prison in Nevada, his cell 8x10, his name forgotten by everyone except those he had harmed. Victoria Ashford sat in a women's facility in California, the cream-colored suits traded for orange jumpsuits, her name synonymous now with cruelty instead of charity. Both had received exactly what they deserved, not death, which would have been too quick, too easy, too merciful, but time. Endless, aching time to consider what they had done. Mia visited the shelter where she had stolen Emma's first shoes. She carried boxes of clothing, stacks of new shoes in small sizes, $15,000 worth of supplies purchased with money from her own wages, money she had earned through work that was legal, that was hers, that did not require her to disappear into the background of other people's lives. The director of the shelter wept. "Who are you?" she asked. "Someone who remembers being nobody," Mia said. "Someone who was remembered when no one else would." Luca stood at the edge of the donation, Rocco and Sal waiting by the car, watching their boss smile at a woman distributing shoes to children. In 15 years, they had never seen him smile like that, not the predator's smile of a man closing in, but the genuine smile of a man who had learned, somehow, against all odds, that building was better than destroying. The sun was setting as Mia and Luca walked through the lodge at dusk, Emma running ahead of them on the stone path, her pink shoes bright against the fading light. Through the great windows, the mountains stood eternal, impassive, witnesses to every moment that had brought them here. Mia's voice came soft as the gathering dark. Sometimes one hand reached out at the right moment can change an entire life. The night I collapsed in that snow, I did not know I was being saved. I thought I was dying. But that stranger who carried me inside, he was not a good man by any traditional measure. He was dangerous. He was powerful. He was everything the world taught me to fear. Yet he saw me when I was invisible, and that made all the difference. Sometimes the people who save you are the ones who need saving just as much. Sometimes mercy is the hardest form of strength, and survival is never just about staying alive. It is about learning you deserve to live. If this story moved your heart, please drop a like right now. Share it with someone who needs to hear that they are not nobody, that darkness does not have to define them, that one moment of recognition from another person can change everything. Subscribe because tomorrow we are bringing you another story that will shift the way you see the world. Leave a comment below and tell us, have you ever had someone reach out at exactly the right moment? Has anyone ever seen you when you felt invisible? We read every single comment, and your words matter. Thank you for staying with us until the very end. We wish you good health, joy, and days filled with peace. No matter how hard life gets, remember that after the rain, the sky clears. We will see you again in the next video.